wanted to switch gears here for a minute because there's been a story that's been bubbling, an international story, geopolitical. So I wanted to turn our focus to that. And that is, of course, what everyone's talking about, the Chinese balloon, right? So I call it the weather balloon because that's what it looks like. And it was kind of just floating. And I guess my position on this, just so you know, is that I feel like China knows where all our nuclear silos are. Like, I don't think they needed to send a balloon. I'm sure there's some sort of theory. And Reef, if you want to put up some of the memes, but there's some good memes that came out of the whole balloon debacle. But you worked in a lot of issues around China, and we were kind of having a pre-conversation before the show. Could you kind of tell me your take on this? Because I think it's a little different than mine, but go ahead and
Sure.
talk about.
Myself working, basically as a supervisor within the Chinese counterintelligence division. It's important to know that the Chinese are not United States friends. They are here for the sole purpose to spy on America. Now, a lot of people don't understand that by Chinese law, every single Chinese citizen is required to spy on America for the Chinese. And that's every single American, or every single Chinese person. So that means every Chinese student, every Chinese professor, anybody that's here working for a Chinese business like Google or Facebook or whoever, right? They're there to steal as much intellectual property as they can, and then transfer it back to the Chinese government. I mean,
So
there's a simple reason.
This is economic competition then.
Sure, it's both. It's both. It's across the board. Any information that they can get, and they're required to do it. I mean, but the Chinese have been getting away with it for years, right? So Donald Trump starts the China Initiative, which allows for FBI agents greater scrutiny in investigating Chinese students at these universities who are stealing intellectual property from these universities blindly. And what does Biden do? Biden, as soon as he takes office, he starts to slowly deteriorate that and then brings an end to the China Initiative, which basically handcuffs the hands of FBI agents who want to go investigate these students that are at these universities. Listen, not every student is a spy, but every student is a potential spy. And that's important because if they're working on groundbreaking technology, that technology they could steal and send back to China. I mean, there's a reason why, if you haven't seen it, all of their jet fighters for the military, their ships, and their tanks look like ours because they've already stolen that information. And that's just a professional opinion on my point. I don't have any proof of that, but you don't need that if you just compare the different planes and the tanks and the ships. They all look the same. And there's a reason for that because they've probably been stealing that information for years. The Chinese, they deal with America. They don't want a full out war with America right now. They want to basically kill us by a death of 1,000 cuts, meaning that they have their spies on the ground. They have their satellites on the ground. And now they have these balloons. We don't know what these balloons are. And, it's kind of scary. And I've said this before, in my professional opinion, I believe that Joe Biden, the president of the United States, is either he's compromised by the Chinese government, either directly or indirectly through his son, Hunter Biden. And that's important to know because if you look at this balloon, the US government never told us it was here. They never took the opportunity to shoot this balloon down, no matter what it was. It had known surveillance equipment on it. It had propulsion, which means that the balloon could maneuver back and forth, left and right. And it had a rudder, which means that it could steer. So that this balloon was being steered by somebody. It wasn't just floating within the atmosphere. And it was making left and right turns over our military bases. Well, why was it doing that? Well, that's what we need to find out. If the US government knows, they should have taken action and taken this thing down beforehand. When they finally did take the action to take this down, number one, they took it down over water, which makes it harder to retrieve the equipment. And number two, they used a Sidewinder missile and blew the heck out of this thing right at where basically the surveillance equipment was. They could have taken it out at the balloon, but they didn't do that. They took it out where the equipment was, which basically allows for us not to gather any information.
let me ask you this. Like, I'm gonna push back a little bit because
Yeah,
I have
sure.
a little different view. But like two things. First of all, I'm not, as you know, a Biden fan at all. So this isn't in defense of the Biden administration.
Sure.
But I guess how I feel as a person who, as you know, is anti-imperialist, anti-war, I feel like some of these same arguments that you're making about China was made about Russia. And
Mhm.
it's like trying to create this enemy where we have to spend money and we have to build up our military. And I guess to this point, first of all, weather balloons, like, okay, or spy balloons, whatever you want to call it. I call it, they say it's a meteorological whatever. It's not proven what it is, or if it's a communication, some sort of device or whatever it is, scanning device. Whatever that thing was, it's supposed to be difficult to take down those balloons. It's very difficult. And, it's interesting because on, the show earlier today, Kim was talking about that, about the difficulties of that. She also talked about concerns about China. But my personal opinion is that why would China want to do surveillance in that way? Are they making fun of us? Are they provoking us? Are they seeing what our military, how they will respond? Are those kinds of things happening? And if so, is it tied in to our aggression via NATO for this proxy war in Ukraine against Russia?
So you can be outraged by the people running our country selling out our country to China, and you should be, but that's a very different thing from wanting to go to war with China, a war that we have no assurance we would win, to put it mildly. But in a memo to his troops, four-star Air Force General Mike Minahan wrote this, quote, "My gut tells me we will fight in 2025. Xi Jinping secured his third term and set his war council in October 2022. Taiwan's presidential elections are in 2024 and will offer Xi a reason. U.S. presidential elections are in 2024 and will offer Xi a distracted America. Xi's team, reason, and opportunity are all aligned for 2025. So what should we take of this? Again, you can be deeply skeptical, in fact, hostile toward China, and still be worried about going to war with China.
So what is your thought on that? What Tucker said?
Well, it's interesting, right? It's an interesting theory. But me studying the Chinese for as long as I had,
Okay.
and I know we talked about this before we came on air.
Mhm.
The Chinese are somewhat unpredictable, but they're predictable. And when I say that, I mean they're unpredictable by what this balloon was, right? We don't know if maybe they needed more precise mapping of the missile silos over certain military areas, and the only way they could do that with the atmospheric changes between their satellites and getting something below the atmosphere where they could do it was they needed this balloon. I'm not really sure. And why the heck that they blew it the heck out of that thing over the ocean, I'll never know. We can put a man on the moon. We can shoot a missile in the air and dock it with a space station within millimeters. But yet we can't take a balloon down with all the scientists we have and basically pinpoint the exact landing spot based on mathematical and calculations of how much air is going to go through the balloon, where you shoot it, and that sort of thing. Those are the things that are scary about our government. And it's important to know you're never going to get the truth out of the United States government, and you're certainly not going to get the truth out of the Chinese government. But again, getting back to this death by 1,000 cuts with the Chinese,
Okay.
they like to process everything with their spies, and they think they're a lot smarter than us. And when I say that, I mean, I talked about this back last March on a program with the Chinese, and when Chinese tensions were growing with Taiwan. And everybody thought that the Chinese were going to march into Taiwan. And I said, no, that's not going to happen because the Chinese have so many spies within Taiwan right now, and they're paying off so many people within Taiwan. They're hoping that they can just turn the people of Taiwan into a pro-Chinese island and then take over the island that way. That's what they're looking to do. And I believe that's what they're looking to do. And along the same respects of, they're kind of here doing that here as well, right? They're involved in the fentanyl trade. They're involved they're pouring money into these Antifa and Black Lives Matter and all of these socialist groups who are attacking the U.S. government and attacking the conservative movement. They're pouring money into. we saw the same exact thing in the 60s with the Soviet Union, pouring money into these groups within the 60s, with the anti-Vietnam movement and that sort of thing. So the Chinese, I don't think that they want an all-out war, but they definitely want control within the area around where they are, meaning they want control of the Strait of Taiwan. They want control of the waters between the Philippines and the waters around Japan. They want to control all of those waters, and they don't want the United States there. So they're trying to drive us out.